The scariest part is you sign your noble silence and they take your car keys, your cell phone, any electronic devices. You can't journal, you can't read. You literally have your bedding and your clothes. I'm like freaking out that I'm turning off my phone and handing it over. And I'm like, what if my family, like, what if they can't find, like, there's no location services? Like,
Yeah.
it was very intense.
Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality. If you're new here, my name is Kat, and I'm a longtime astral traveler and spirit consultant. And I am so pleased and honored to have joining me today Denise Thistlewaite, who is a published children book author and the founder of a website, Enlightened Life, or An Enlightened Life, correct?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here, Kat.
Perfect. I'm excited to have you here and hear about your journey. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started and how all of this got started for you?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. So, I was an educator. I was in working for the fifth largest school district in the nation, and I was a teacher and then a school-based administrator. And then I went to work in a division of HR and ended up in the legal department where I was the director of investigations. Basically was accepting calls from administrators that had emergencies and wanted to know how to deal with them with employees at the site, and then we would deal with discipline and all of that. And then I was a hearing officer for grievance hearings for discipline that was issued or for dismissals, um, negative evaluations, all of that. And then if it went to the point of arbitration, I would go to arbitration and represent the school district. Many hearings every day where, and you and I talked about this briefly as a union steward, like I'd be in the conference room and here's our conference, the grievance hearing, and the employee and the union steward is on one side and the school administrator and the lawyer is on the other. And they're both telling their sides of the story. And the negative energy in the room was just palpable. Like
Yeah,
I knew what the job was going to be when I took it, but I had no idea the intensity of the emotion, um,
absolutely.
just the
For
anger and
for those watching that weren't aware, I used to be a union shop steward for the postal service before I decided that it wasn't for me for almost exactly the same reason. So I feel what you're saying so much because it's such an adversarial environment that the negative energy is an unbelievable pressure for sure.
yeah, it really was. It was super intense and I was trying to deal with, just so much of it coming at me and I wasn't dealing with it well. Let's put it that way. I was getting migraines, I was not sleeping at night. I have three kids and a husband, and I, try not to dump it in my kitchen when I got home. So I'm like, you know, trying to leave it at work as best I could. But the stories were super disturbing, and it gnaws away at you. Like it becomes just this record of people making these bad decisions. And basically, I was looking for stress relief. So it was right around the time when mindfulness was becoming a thing. So I started looking into mindfulness, and I was understanding the concept, but I was grappling with like, what if this moment now sucks? Like you're living in mindfulness and if things aren't going well, how do you deal with that? So I enrolled in a course at the University of Massachusetts called Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction. And I started taking the lessons. It was online. And part of the course was a retreat requirement. So I was like, oh, I like put this work on the side. I'm like, I need a retreat. I need a retreat. That was the end to tell my husband I have to go away to a spa, right? So I
Nice.
start like searching for retreats and I found a donation based retreat, which was Vipassana. And I'm like, this is something I have to try. And it was a 10-day silent retreat. And going there for stress relief, I'm like, peace and quiet. Honestly, Kat, it was like the complete opposite. It was extremely stressful. It was very intense, but I had a
Yeah.
definite life changing experience there.
Can you tell us a little bit about the practices there or what it is you went through? I feel like a lot of people look into or wanting to do some sort of a spiritual retreat, but I also feel like there's a kind of nervousness or a hesitancy to do something, especially like a silent retreat where it feels like confining or worrisome. There's been a lot of, specials about cults and stuff on TV and everything, and so I feel like there may be some misconceptions or some worry about it out there. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened at the
Yeah, of
retreat?
course. I would love to. So, when I first talked to my husband, he was like, "No way, you're not doing that because you kind of are going off the grid for 11 days in the middle of the
Yeah.
desert." It was in 29 Palms, California. And coincidentally, I had talked to a friend who I hadn't spoken with in a really long time. She doesn't even live in the state anymore. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I would totally do that. I really want to try that. I've heard about it." So we signed up together and promised we wouldn't speak or have any communication, but it felt more comfortable going with someone.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you get there, it's completely overwhelming. Like the anxiety that I felt was just, I mean, I was just a wreck because you get there and there's 32 or 36 men and 36 women, and they come out and you have to sign a noble silence where you're not going to speak to anyone, you're not exchanging glances with anyone, there's no communication whatsoever. But the scariest part is you sign your noble silence and they take your car keys, your cell phone, any electronic devices. You can't journal, you can't read. You literally have your bedding and your clothes. And I'm like holding my phone, and I mean, I'm not that addicted to my phone. I know some people are worse, but I'm like freaking out that I'm turning off my phone and handing it over. And I'm like, what if my family, like, what if they can't find, like, there's no location services? Like,
Yeah.
it was very intense. And they're like, say your goodbyes to your family. And they do say, send them a text with the phone number here. In case there's an emergency, we can pull you, you know, and let you know, and you can contact your family. But you're basically texting them and you're saying, I'm going off the grid for the next 10 days and wish me luck. And it was really unnerving. It just, it was scary to me because it was just things I wasn't expecting or things I had read about that now you're plunged into, and it
Yeah.
just felt very shocking, the whole realm of all of it coming to fruition.
Yeah, it's like a forced surrender where you have to hand over your phone, all your lifelines to the outside world, and yeah,
Absolutely.
that it does sound like that would be a frightening and uncomfortable experience to go through. How did the silence go? Like,
Wow, it was hard. So it's so strange because I had practiced meditating. You know, I could sit for a good 2.5 hours a day because I knew it was going to be like 10-hour sits, you know, broken up between the day. But I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And um, you have an assigned space that's your 3 by 3 square for the entire time that you're there. So you have a cabin that you sleep in, but then a gong sounds and it's meditation time. So you're walking up this hill and you take off your shoes and you go into your space and you sit in meditation. And it's so quiet. Your mind is just, it's like 10 times what it would be at home because there's no outlet, because you can't speak, you can't listen to music, you can't write. It's just this, it's all me, myself, and I. And after a couple days, so the men and the women are separated. So you're just now with all the women for the whole retreat. But your mind is like, you start making up stories about everyone and their lives. Like, you can't stop the flow of constant thinking. And after like I mean, I was miserable the first couple days. And by the third day, now you're starting to create voices in your own head. You're talking, you're answering, and I'm like, holy crap, like this is beyond what I was capable of it processing without being in it. You know, you can read all you want about being in an experience, but when you're thrust into it, it's just a whole new ball game. So it was really difficult. And another thing
yeah,
that I really struggled with was like the food was fabulous. You're waiting in this food line and it's all vegan. And I remember specifically on the very first day, this, I mean, I'm 5'4". This larger woman just comes barreling toward me. Like I could feel her right here coming toward me. And she bumps into me and she steps in front of me in line. And I'm like, what is happening? So I'm pissed. Like emotions are starting to roil up and I'm like, oh my God, like, does she have a problem with me? And 2 whole days, this woman was just like the bane of my existence. And I had to have a serious self talk because I'm like, you're not going to get this opportunity again to be able to leave work, to be able to leave your family, to come experience this. And all of the judgment and so much, you know, ego mind was happening. I was missing it. I was missing the experience because I had to realize you have to shut that off and she was so focused on herself. I'm sure she didn't even realize what she was doing, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's an interesting allegory for life because so many people are just bumping around, bumping into people, and totally focused on what they're doing. And the fact of the matter, it may not even be about you. But we do spend a lot of
Absolutely.
time telling ourselves stories about it and making ourselves upset and angry over situations where probably somebody else's, it's not even about you to them, you know?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, like, an exercise in controlling the flow of that. Like, is it worth it for me to make myself upset and miss all of the experiences that I'm having to succumb to my own anger and my own ego and my own imaginings over the situation?
Yeah, and thank God, like I had read enough about mindfulness before I went. So I kept like reminding myself, even though Vipassana is different than that, I was like, bring yourself back to the present moment. And I like realized you're going to miss all of this if you don't knock this off. So thankfully, I was able to see that like through metacognition, right? Like where I'm saying
Right.
you need to cut the cord here because you're going to waste all of your time and you're not going to have a good experience if you're so focused on that part.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought process and a valuable lesson. That's interesting. It sounds like it's to my experience anyway, like a fairly like higher level thing to be attempting to do 10 days of total silence. And I don't know. They don't seem like they had any kind of like requirement of like how much do you know about meditation and mindfulness practices before you come in. I imagine some people, did you have were there some people who didn't handle it very well?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So they said if anyone wants to leave, because some couples came, so like you wouldn't see your husband for however many days, or your significant other, and they said if someone's going to leave, we'll like let you know. Do you want to stay? They'll come get you. Are you leaving with them? And it was the strangest thing in the beginning because obviously we couldn't see the men, but like three seats up and two over, the person was just gone. And so now you're creating a whole story about what you think happened with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was difficult. And throughout the progression, so the first 3 days you do what's called anapana breathing, which is just focusing on your breath, going in and out of your nostrils and that sensation. And then day 4 through 10 is where you're doing the vipassana, and it's a completely different kind of meditation. But before I went, I read a lot about it because I'm as an educator and I'm gonna get all the information I can. I'm not gonna go in blind. And I had read about a dark night that you can experience and just different things. So I feel like I was a little more mentally prepared than some people. Um, I think there should have been a warning that you need to know certain things before you go. We did have to sign paperwork that we are not diagnosed with any mental health issues. And I had read something about some young ladies that had some mental health issues that then wandered off and had a horrible thing happen to them. Um, that was like one incident that, of course, is easy to find on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I thought was really helpful for me, I swore myself to this noble silence. And because I was so aware of what might happen, I was like, I'm going to work through this. Like, I can tell myself this isn't real. Like, this is your imagination. And all of this is happening because of the Vipassana meditation part. But they did have counselors there. And during our lunch hour, there was like a 2 block of lunch where you could sign up on a board for a time. And starting like the third day, there'd be 3 people in line to talk to someone, and then there'd be 9 people in line. So the line was growing and growing with people that needed to talk through their stuff. But I think that definitely was a coping mechanism that needed to be in place for people's safety so that they really could deal with their emotions, because we would be sitting in meditation and some people would be hysterically crying. And I mean, it was just, you really are just in your own head all the time.
Yeah,
So,
and it probably for the vast majority of people just living regular lives are unaware, I think, probably of just how mean we can be to ourselves in our own minds and the stories that we're telling ourselves and the negative spin that's really in the thought process if it's not brought to awareness. And
yeah,
I imagine just sitting silently and having all of that come up and having to look in the mirror to face like just how mean we can be to ourselves in our
yeah,
own head is that's a lot to face for
yeah,
sure. I'm glad they
absolutely.
had a support process in place or people to talk to at the least there because that's a pretty intense thing.
Yeah.
What did you find? What came out of it for you? Like,
Kat, it completely changed my life. And so when I went in, I was raised Catholic. I'm not an overly spiritual person. I, you know, went to church on holidays and whenever. And I really just thought I was going to relax and kind of de-stress with no sound. What happened to me was absolutely insane in my mind because I never would have believed it. I had a dark night that was very intense, and when I got through that, and I could tell you about that, but when I got through that, I had the most unbelievable awakening experience that was the most spiritual thing I ever could have imagined. It completely changed my life. And it was just, I literally became another person. Like this knowing and feeling of this love and energy and abundance of God, of source, of universe, of love that was just so overwhelming, that is in us and around us and all of us because we truly are one, connected in that way. I've read about that and I was like, I don't know. I have lived it and it has changed my life. I mean, everything from the way I approached the work before I left, because as a hearing officer, right, I know the rules, I know the regulations, I know the statutes. You come in, you broke the law, this is what happened, here's the consequence. Everything was very black and white for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I went back afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, like these people do not understand that they have choices and options. And they're making these mistakes and judgments by reacting so quickly and not even taking a step back and realizing that they have a choice. So things play out differently for them. And I came back and I was like, I have to help them in a different way. Like I was so much more a counselor. And of course, still you had to follow the rules. There's going to be a consequence. But I built such a connection with the people that were in front of me that I hadn't had before because they were just you did this wrong and here's your thing, next case. Where now I was like, you have to learn that you can do things differently and you'll have different reactions. And it was funny because people even would come, like they would have, say, 4 months down the road, it's the kids that were in trouble in the dean's office. Now they're grown up. Now they're sitting before you as an adult and they're saying, oh my gosh, I was hoping you weren't my hearing officer because I really was trying and I really want to change. And I'm like, I'm so glad I am your hearing officer because we need to talk this through some more. And it just changed the whole perspective of the work. It wasn't so heavy anymore because there was a teaching element to it that I felt like was my purpose now. It just changed everything.
That is such a beautiful transformation, and you're right that feeling of oneness, the love and the connectedness that's really out there. Yeah, you hear it talked about all the time. It's been spoken about in all kinds of ancient practices as well. But it's once you experiencing it is really really eye opening, and I think that's beautiful to be like experiencing the fact that love and embracing and connectedness and oneness is for everybody. It's literally all things. And so even people who are making mistakes or making poor choices, it's easier to see it as a learning process or a part of their life journey to back off of the judgmentalness ourselves and be able to provide uh, less judgmental like coaching or learning. That's
Yeah.
a really beautiful transformation, especially for that type of work.
Yeah, thank you. It really was a huge transformation for me. And just, it, I also learned like it's just so much about perspective. Like this person is telling their truth about what happened, and this person's telling their truth about what happened. And somewhere in the middle is the reality of it all, but everyone's right because that's their perception of what happened. And it's just, it was just so strange because I really was a black and white person. And my family was even like, wow, you're just different. And in such a better way. And I feel like through that, like I have really grown in my meditation practice. And that's what got me, to start an enlightened life and, my social medias. And I'm writing a book right now. And I'm like, I just, one conversation at a time to help people understand that their past does not define them and that they do have choices that they can make to have better outcomes, to be happier. It's just, it's a it's such a crazy feeling to have found your life's purpose. Like,
Yeah, I was going to ask you what inspired you moving forward to start a website and start putting stuff out there. What was the journey for you from doing that kind of work and moving into doing spiritual work, enlightened work?
yeah, so it's kind of crazy. So I got back from the retreat, and I was completely overwhelmed by the loudness of everything, the lights, the sounds, social, the emails, the phone. It just throws you back because you're just thrown back into it, which was really hard. And for a while, I was great. I was so happy, and I was like, I have a new perspective, and it's all going to go so well. And it was going really well for like 3, 4 months. And then all of a sudden, as every day passed, it felt further and further away. Like, did I really feel that? Like, did I imagine that? And I was yearning for this feeling again. And through that yearning, I was starting to get really depressed. So I'm like, I obviously can't just keep going back and doing this. Like, that's not a realistic life thing. So one day I'm walking to Trader Joe's and I look, and next door to it, I had seen it there a million times. There was a bookstore called Unicorn Used Bookstore. So I go inside and I ask the owner was there, and I'm like, can you point me in spirituality, like self help, like all of that? And he's like, sure. So I spend my whole lunch hour and I'm reading through these books and reading through these books. And I've read self help before. I have authors that I like, and but I'm like reading, and it's all the same. Like basically just different words, but kind of all the same message. And it wasn't what I was looking for because I was really just feeling very defeated. So I'm leaving. I actually have the book I pulled to show you. At the top, near a top shelf, there's this book. It's dirty. It has no jacket cover. I mean, it's like this. I can hardly even see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, can you get that book down for me? So he gets the book down for me, and it's called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. And I open this book, and let me read a little bit to you. I mean, what I just read. Is that okay if I do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So it says, we all know that after the honeymoon comes the marriage. After the election comes the hard task of governance. In spirituality, life is the same. After the ecstasy comes the laundry. Most spiritual accounts end with illumination or enlightenment. But what happens after that? What happens when the Zen master returns home to his spouse and children? What happens when the Christian mystic goes shopping? What is life like after the ecstasy? How do we live our understanding with a full heart? And I'm like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah,
this is
exactly what you were
exactly
looking
what I'm
for.
feeling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely was serendipitously drawn to grab this book. Um, and that introduced me to him, which led to other authors that were, all very spiritual, metacognition, intuition, all of that. And I just went down this rabbit hole of just, I mean, I was buying every book I could get my hands on. Like, and my husband, he just like is cleaning, he moving the piles of all of these pillars of books. Like he's not asking. He's like, she's happy. I'm not going to
Yeah.
disrupt the apple cart. And I was just reading and reading, and I'm like, how can I put this into practice? So I'm trying different things, and I'm like, that didn't work. And I tried something else, and that didn't work. But I found some things that were helping. So I just started writing them, and I'm like, I'm just going to blog about it. And I'm writing and writing. And then I was just like, I have to share this with people. So I started doing like little meditation sessions with like directors and managers in our building, and they would come after work, and I'd do like a half hour, an hour session. And I'm like, I have to write this book. And even if I don't know if anyone's going to read it, you never have any idea. But for me to just try to share this, because it's just, there are some things that I've learned that have really helped me live a happier life every single day. And, mindfulness is all a huge part of it, and how it all came back around to the beginning for me in this research of the Vipassana experience and the reading that I've done ever since. So it was just a flow. I mean, I just went with it, and it just took me in places I wouldn't have guessed.
So let me ask you, from what advice can you give people? Because I think your experience of coming from like having an enlightening experience and then having to dive back into everything that involves like modern life and modern society, the noise, the negativity, the constant stuff on the news and TV, all of that stuff comes flooding back in. What advice do you can you offer for people who are having difficulty wanting to keep the high vibe, that love and enlightenment feeling while still managing everyday situations?
Yeah. So I think the key elements for me that were completely life changing. The first was about metacognition, and that the knowledge that we have these thoughts that are constantly coming, you cannot stop ever. Your brain is thinking and you're thinking all the time. The metacognition piece, the fact that you're thinking about your thinking, you're cognitive about, like, okay, water is just a thing, right? That I just popped into my head, water, that I don't like that water. I have a judgment about that water. I don't like that brand of water, whatever. Anything, your thinking is now separate, and it's taking you to another place where it's a lot of judgment. Either you're grasping for something that you want, or a version of something you don't want. So the Vipassana meditation is all about accepting everything as it comes. You're not grasping for a feeling, and you're not pushing away other feelings. Like, there were times you had an itch and you could not scratch it. And I'm like freaking out in my mind because I couldn't scratch this itch, but it passes.
Mm-hmm.
Everything passes. So that was a big part. Then for me, how the mindfulness made a huge difference. I tried an experiment when I got back, and I was like, how much time am I actually spending in the present moment? Because I thought I was doing pretty well. So I set a timer on my phone, and I set it for like 8:13, 9:46, 11:12, random times throughout the day. And whenever that timer went off, I literally would stop and I'd be like, what am I thinking about right now? And I was always either thinking about the past, worrying about something, or worrying about the future. I was never in the present moment. So I became very conscious about putting myself in the space of the present moment. So, like, Thanksgiving is an example, right? Everyone comes over to my home and I'm like cooking and there's so much to do. And in years past, I would be like so busy getting things out, putting things away, washing dishes, doing this. I was like, it was the worst day because I was exhausted and I didn't get to visit with anyone. And I learned that I need to be in this moment enjoying these conversations right now and not worried about all of these external things that don't really matter. And
Mm-hmm.
when I took that another step to even be like, I'm out with dinner with friends, or even a separate experience. Someone's next to me at a table, say, you're here and I'm here, and Jessica is here, and we don't know each other, but we're in this lovely cafe having a coffee, for example. And I'm drinking my coffee and I'm super worried about an argument I had with my husband last night. And that's all I'm thinking about. I'm drinking my coffee. And this person over to our left is like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so worried about this job interview that I have in 2 weeks and thinking about that. And then here you are in the present moment and you're drinking your coffee and it's a beautiful day and you're enjoying the way it tastes and the smells and the bustle of the cafe, and you're there, and we are all literally in the same place, 2 feet from one another, and we are not sharing an experience. We're having a completely different
Yeah.
experience because we're stuck up here in the
The
thinking of it all.
interesting thing about that too is that if you're, especially where it relates to other people and socializing, is that how it's interesting that, like, the person worried about the argument with their husband, it's like they will find ways to bring the conversation around to something like that so they can talk about it instead of enjoying what it might have been something better to talk about. Similarly with the other person, like, people who are like that kind of a mindset will,
Yes.
it's like it will turn the conversation, it will turn the events. And so something that would have been a nice tea or a nice coffee with friends turns into a bitching session about, all of this. And then it's, oh yeah, I know that I had this happen. Oh yeah, here's my experience. And it just kind of builds. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it can drag the whole energy of an interaction or a social engagement uh, down into a spiral of not enjoying the coffee. Like, did
Yeah,
anybody even
exactly.
say how good the coffee was?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that just how much time we don't realize that we're not in the present moment.
Yeah.
And you're missing so much. Like, this is it. This is what it's about. Like, you want to go out with your friends and have a lovely night and talk and chat and laugh together, and that's how you're spending it instead. It completely takes a turn. And I understand people need to commiserate, and it helps you to heal and all of that, but like, when I talk to people too, and they would be so like really regurgitating every part of it and feeling they're creating the misery in their heart again of what they were feeling all over again. It's
Yeah.
not happening right now, but they're reliving it right now.
Yeah. And that's an interesting, because it's an interesting thought process, right? Because how do you balance that? How do you balance the need to feel like connected and like you have someone to share your feelings of what you're going through? Because I mean, those feelings are valid. It's valid. If we're all human and we get angry at our spouses or we have things that happen
Hmm.
with the, yeah, but how do I really want to feel that way? Like if I keep repeating that story and telling it to other people and soaking in that energy, I'm really just reliving that past feeling that I don't really want over and over again. Like,
Right.
where is the balance between healing and being present, you know?
Yeah. Um, for me, I understand that you need to talk about it. Like, if something happened and you're talking through and you're sharing because you're looking for advice or you just need to vent, not for someone to solve your problem, but just to hear you so you feel heard and seen,
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely necessary. And we've both done that in our work, right? Like it's such an important part of everything and those relationships for sure to build a connection. But when it gets to a point where you just keep thinking about it all the time and repeating it all the time and reliving it all the time, after like the second, third time for me, I'll be like, okay, I've thought about this many times, or we've talked about this already. There's not anything new that's being shared that's going to come in a positive way. So now you need to make the break and say, that happened. And now I need to move forward and not just keep reliving that event over and over because you're keeping it alive. It's done. Whatever has happened has happened. It's time to move forward and you learn from it. That's the whole purpose. Like every challenge that we have, I truly believe the reason people keep having the same kind of challenges over and over again is because they have not learned from it the first time. And you have to evolve and you have to act differently. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. And if you want different results, you have to take a step back and say, okay, I need to separate myself from this incident or this issue or the emotion of what I'm going through right now. Look at it like I'm watching a movie. Look at things objectively and be like, okay, I know if I act this way, this is going to be the outcome because it's happened before. So I need to react in a different way. I need to think this through. I need to take a beat because so many people just immediately react. They just respond because the emotion is there and they just blah, and it creates this huge problem that didn't need to become a huge problem if you would have just taken a step back to reflect.
Yeah, and there is a conscious awareness piece to that. I think it's very easy for us in adult life to become kind of a slave to our habits and patterns.
Mhm.
Like a lot of us will take the same route to work every day, go to the same grocery store every time, take the same walk, go to the same gas station. We get in like a habit of behavior outwardly as well. And I think it's interesting, reflective of a pattern of behavior or a thought process inwardly as well. Is that a lot of mental activity as well as physical activity is kind of on autopilot.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
taking off the autopilot and actually grabbing a hold of the stick to determine for yourself what thought processes you're going to use, or maybe we go to a different grocery store today, any of that helps create a flexibility of thought process, I think is super helpful.
Yeah, and I think the biggest part of that, you nailed it when you were like, the habits that we're not even conscious of, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
noticing is the most important part. Like, we talked little bit about like you're driving, somebody cuts you off, you feel the heat, you feel the tenseness, you're holding the steering wheel like you're pissed. But to stop and instead of let that emotion take you away, you're taking control of the emotion and you're like, hang on. Like I feel my fist clenching. I feel my heart beating faster. I feel that I'm angry in my body. And when you notice it in your body and you call it out, then you could be like, okay, like, I need to breathe for a second and separate
Yeah, it's
myself from it.
interesting. That's an interesting like example of it too. Like I kind of realized I knew I was getting somewhere with shifting my mental algorithm into a different thought process when I would get cut off in traffic, and suddenly I was like, wow, what a confident driver. I wonder where he's off to. Instead of being angry. Do you know what I mean? I was like,
Absolutely.
wow. he's he's in a hurry. He's a confident driver. I wonder
Yeah,
where
and
he's off
even
to in
like
such a
you
hurry.
even said you have no idea what these people are dealing with and they're in their head. Like at the moment I mentioned at the retreat, like things are happening in their lives and up here that's not even real, like their imagination of running away with them that this or that happened when it's not even reality because it's all just this internal emotion that's snowballing and they're not aware of you or him or her or they're just so self-absorbed and it's funny
Yeah.
with like the technology and our evolution of technology. It's so the scary thing to me isn't the AI. It isn't the tools. It's the self-absorption of all of these
Hmm.
like everything is just me, me, me. Like look at me, and I need this, and I want this, and I have to manifest this, and I understand that, but there's a for me like an integrity to just do the right thing and to be a good person just because you need to be a good person for other people that's sometimes lacking that's so important in everything that we do in every relationship and communication that we have whether we know the person or not just to be kind that missing link is just that's the scary thing to me because I feel like as an educator when I looked at covid my son was home for a year, over a year, and it
Hmm.
changed these kids. Like everything is just
Hmm.
like the texting and the hiding behind a screen and even the way that people were interacting like through work. It's just it's so strange. It feels like it's going to be such a huge task to try to shift back to the personalization of it all to pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone instead of doing it the easy quick way, you know?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel like, and this is a little off topic, but
Oh, yeah,
it's
I'm sorry.
interesting. No, 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 it's okay. Like when the conversation evolves, flow with it, right? So I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting. It's for posterity, I think, to sort out what the internet age really had an effect overall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I can see a lot of there is a lot of self absorption, or I think more so that seeking external validation, like, subscribe, click on me, I'll do whatever you want to, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like there's a kind of a desperation for validation or approval, judging your approval based on whether or not other people are responding to you.
Yeah.
And but at the same time there's also, I mean, it's kind of undeniable that the proliferation of information and the spread of, like, you and I are able to have this conversation today, and otherwise we may never have even met, we're able to put out information about spirituality and walking a healthier mindset path, and the red tape isn't there. Nobody needs to produce this. It doesn't need to be on Netflix. Nobody
Yeah.
has to give me the thumbs up for my script. You and I can just have a flow of conversation about it. There's nothing stopping us from sharing our experiences. And I think because of that, we've seen a lot of change and a lot of growth and a lot of, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse, right? Because everybody can say how they actually feel from behind a screen.
Yeah.
So you're getting, you're seeing where there's still anger points. You're seeing where humanity is not healed, where we're getting the broader picture of what was really going on inside people's minds individually because they feel safer expressing that behind the keys of behind their screen. And like any healing process, I think it looks ugly
Yeah.
when it, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
also airing out some of the things that we lived in kind of a suppressed society where it wasn't okay to say things out loud. And so
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. I mean, the future is in our hands and how we choose to handle it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm I am not I am not saying that that's a bad thing at all that people I mean literally we're going to finish this and you're going to send me video and I'm going to be like watch me, right? I'm doing the same thing by saying come watch me on my channel, go to my website and get free meditations, like all of that. I think though
Yeah.
the important part to me is that you're doing this for a reason of integrity. You're doing it with an underlying good for the purpose. Like it's not an when it's not for an ego-based purpose, like I want to monetize so I could buy this car, right? when it's
Hmm.
more like I want to be out there and share this information publicly so that I can help people deal with their stuff. And I truly believe that since I came back and I had this completely different mindset, because I was so, I mean, I told you the woman come, I was judging. Like I was so judgy. And I'm going to be judgy till the day I die. I am not perfect by any means, but I'm noticing it. And I will say, okay, Denise, like, there, stop being judgy. Like, and I'm catching myself. And until I'm dead and in the grave, I'm going to be doing those things. And I'm going to be caught up in emotion and I'm going to be making mistakes. And I have to take my own advice. And sometimes my husband will be like, did you watch your last video? And yeah, I totally get it. But to, it's a learning process. And the fact that we can be like, okay, there's a better way, or maybe there's a different way that would be helpful, and try those things and be open to it. That is what I think is like the key and most important aspect, that we're learning and we're growing in a positive way from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like anything else, the internet and the communication processes that we have now, any tool, it can be used in a destructive fashion or in a constructive fashion. And
Hmm.
so we can only hope when we all look back at it eventually that the constructive uses were outweighed by far the destructive ones.
Yeah.
And I think that when we put out videos like this one and collaborating with people on how to keep a more positive mindset, we're contributing to that more constructive side of it. So
Yeah, I hope so. That's the intent.
absolutely. Can you let everybody know where they can find your website, what things they'll find there, what tools are available for them?
Yeah, I would
Let
love
people know where
to.
they can find you.
So I am on TikTok and Instagram under An Enlightened Life, and my website is anenlightenedlife.com. And on my website, I'm a voice actor now. I have retired from that other job. I did 4 more years of the counseling part of it, so the Vipassana advantages definitely were used. But I produce meditations as well as regular voice acting. So there's a free meditation if you sign up with your email that'll come to your inbox every 2 weeks. And then I'm writing a book right now, so it's about 2/3 of the way done. But there's some goodies on the website there, and I try to post almost every day. A little bit less recently, but just some tidbits and helpful information about kind of getting through some of these life things that we talked about. So hopefully it'll help someone. Like I said, one conversation at a time, right?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate you being here. I think it's so important for people to put this kind of thing out there, to be supportive of others and to share what they've learned to help support other people in their learning process, because I think it's a journey for everybody for sure. And the more we can share, the better off everybody will be. So
Well, it was absolutely a pleasure. I love talking to you, and I'd love to come back again sometime. I think we have a
absolutely.
great energy together. It's nice when you feel that with someone, you can feel the connection. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to. I will post all of those links in the description. Go check out Denise on her website. Check out the guided meditations. They're always a good and powerful tool and very helpful. And thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Like, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. And we will see you next time on
Thank you.
Spirituality.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.